If you use the internet on a daily basis, and chances are you do, you probably don't put much thought into cybersecurity. You know, your network connections, the pages you visit, the files you download. You should be thinking about these all the time. Welcome to And Security for All. Your host is Kim Hakim. We're here to help you understand, in general terms, how and why your cybersecurity should be kept in check. Now, here is Kim Hakim.
Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. I'm Kim Hakim, your host. Welcome to another episode of And Security for All. Well, our first month of 2023 has came and gone. It's kind of crazy that time it just flies. I hope everyone's year is starting out healthy, happy, and most importantly, secure. As a reminder, I just want to remind all of our listeners that we have two outlets of listeners out there. We have our radio show on Voice America, and we have had some really amazing guests. Last week we had Ken Foster, who we recorded that on a Tuesday instead of a Friday. So if our regular listeners are out there today, you can go to Voice of America and look for And Security for All. You can find that on any place that you listen to your podcast, but he is the Senior VP of Fleet Corps, and he's really awesome. That was a great show, so go check that out. Again, we have another outlet of listeners on LinkedIn Live, and we welcome all of our LinkedIn Live listeners. If you have any questions, just drop those in the chat. We'd love to hear from you all as well. As many of you all know, I'm the CEO of FutureCon Events. We host cybersecurity conferences all over North America, and we're already ramped up, and we just finished our first month of events. We had 3 events back to back in January. The first one was virtual, which was great, but then we were back out in Dallas and Los Angeles, and it seems like things are finally getting back to normal. People are coming back out to our live events. They were coming out last year. It took a little more coaxing people to come out and convincing, and now it looks like people are just registering and ready to get back to normal. We run all of our events in a hybrid mode, and we stream everything live for our loyal attendees that may be remote or stuck in their office, because that's just the nature of their job being a cybersecurity practitioner. So we try to provide all that great content at our events to listeners that may want to tune in and catch all of our great speakers. Next week, we are heading out to Chicago. That is going to be a very packed event. If you're in the Chicago area, check it out. Love to see you there. Then we're off to DC, Detroit, and then Montreal. So we're excited to head over to Canada. You guys can check out our events at futureconevents.com. You can DM me on LinkedIn. Love to have you. We've had so many attendees and speakers and sponsors that have found out about our events through this podcast. So we're really grateful that we have this platform to talk about what we have coming up. It's been really great this year. Our events are great. We have the best expert speakers, amazing sponsors who are showcasing their products and services. So with that being said, I have another great expert speaker on the show today. And shamefully, when pre-show, I forgot to ask him how to properly say his last name. So I'm going to take a long shot at this, but I have Alon Nachmany on the show. He was in Top Cyber News magazine as a 40 under 40. He is a 3-time CISO, thought leader, speaker, board member, advisor, he's chief information officer. He's done all kinds of things. Currently, he is running AZEN Consulting. So we have a lot to talk about, and happy to have him on the show. Thanks for being here. Welcome to the show, Alon.
Thank you for having me.
How bad did I mess up your last name?
No, the last name you got perfect.
Okay.
Truthfully, the last name you got, the first name is Alone, like by myself.
Alone. Of course, that would be what I would do.
That's okay.
Alone.
No worries. I'm very used to it.
So, welcome to the show. I know we've kind of chatted, via LinkedIn for a while now. So I'm happy that we finally found the time to get you on the show, and we both could make this happen. Congratulations for being in that magazine. Tell us a little bit about that magazine and how, tell us a little bit about you and your background and how you got to where you are now, and how you ended up in that fabulous magazine, because it looked like it was a global, the other people that were in that magazine.
So yeah, so the magazine is really an incredible magazine. I love reading it because it's a magazine that tries to stay neutral. They try to stay away from any political issue or geopolitics. They really try to stay almost like Switzerland. It's produced out of Berlin. Ludmila runs it, and she does an amazing job. She does it all by herself. It doesn't. I don't think it has even any like corporate sponsors or anything like that. So it does definitely have a lot of integrity. And like you said, it's really something global and has um, a view from around the world. There's people from Singapore, Asia, Africa. There's some really great leaders there. And I highly recommend the magazine in general. I'm working on an article for them for their next issue around aviation security, so that should be pretty interesting. And yeah, I mean, like I said, Ludmila does an amazing job with it. So for those of you who haven't read it, haven't heard about it, um, Cyber News Now magazine is incredibly um, beneficial. That being said, just talking about cybersecurity, as you said, I've been a CISO 3 times now. I always ask myself, or when I see somebody who wants to be a CISO, I always ask them, why? Why do you want to be a CISO? Because it's definitely not easy. As far as how I came into this, truth be told, I fell into cybersecurity. Um, I've been doing tech my whole life, and when I say my whole life, I mean as a teenager, my summer jobs were doing migrations off of mainframes and onto PCs, and using IBM's emulator for mainframes to still connect to the old data. Um, doing some conversions from microfilm to the big laser discs. For those who remember those, well, I feel like I'm really dating myself here.
That's okay.
That's
You're 40 under 40, so you're not dating yourself.
Again, I was a teenager doing all this stuff, and I ran. It's funny because as a teenager I actually ran the teams that did the integrations, just because I was gaining so much experience. And when we did this, like the microfilm and the laserdisc stuff, you know, I did for like major hospitals out of Boston. I did it for the U.S. Post Office for their records. So that was always kind of my fun and my passion. I served in the Israeli military for 3 years, and then I did my reserve duty as a special response unit police officer in Tel Aviv. Um, Came back to the States after I finished my master's in Israel, um, and really fell into financial technology. I was doing a lot of ultra low latency, high frequency trading back in 2011. I think we broke the record. I was the VP of technology for a company by the name of Burstream, where we did normalized data and basically aggregating multiple different financial data feeds into one data feed that was normalized. We could clean the ticker symbols and we could do all that. We were sitting there and measuring each piece of fiber, calculating, should we go with fiber, should we go with copper, and really doing, I mean, we broke the record. We got it, from the feed handoff all the way into your memory buffer if you were doing an algo trade, in under 600 nanoseconds, which at the time was unheard of. We were using FPGA and some cutting edge technology. Fast forward, I joined a market maker on Wall Street, and they ended up getting hacked. And they got hacked, and one of the principals came up to me and said, "Hey, guess what? You have military experience. You used to be in law enforcement. You're our new CISO. Congratulations. Go figure it out." And that's really what I did. I banged my head against a desk and I figured it out. I found out, how do we do this? And we went from a shop that did at the time 1.5 million with Checkpoint to a shop that, do we go to Palo Alto at the time? Do we look at other technologies? What are we doing for endpoint? What are we doing for MDM? What are all these different technologies that, you know, 15 years ago, or maybe a little bit less, 12 years ago, weren't really top of mind or something that we spoke about in tech. And that was kind of my almost push into the deep end, and you better swim and figure it out. Moved on from there to a small startup at the time by the name of WeWork.
Yeah, I would love to be. I've always been very curious about WeWork, and I see you were in New York with that company, but aren't they based out of San Francisco?
So WeWork at the time, at least, was based out of New York. We did have conversations about moving it to California, or I think Adam also at the time also wanted to move it to Miami potentially, really wherever he could surf and do best by that. So I was employee number 200 there, shared a glass wall with Adam for a little bit. Definitely some interesting conversations there. But I ran the entire tech team, from negotiating contracts with Google, ISPs around the world, running the help desk, running the AV team. We produced our own shows. The AV team also handled all the conference room tech and all of that stuff, and of course information security. And I ended up taking on information security as the company grew, because I enjoyed it, and it's so incredibly important, especially with a company that we knew was going to try an IPO, is a good way of putting it, because that kind of blew up. But we were putting things in place. I mean, back in 2014 for an IPO, because I mean that was the strategy of the company. Grew my team on the help desk, to over 250 people. Grew some of the other teams as well. It was definitely a challenging experience. It was a lot of hard work, but well worth it at the end of the day. I think that was something that was definitely a lot of fun. If those who are in a startup or think about joining a startup, if you think that when you get to a certain role or a certain level, you're not going to be there painting the walls or doing whatever needs to be done, you're very wrong. And I think that that's something, when we talk about startups, that people tend to forget, is that your title might have a C in it, or a VP, or a director, or whatever it is. When there's work to be done, you're in it with everybody else, and you're doing it. Something that we don't always see at kind of larger companies that are able to hire on the staff to do it, are sometimes not bootstrapping it, or just are able to afford another way of doing it. Moved on from WeWork to a company by the name of Bromium. Bromium ended up getting sold off to HP. So those of you who are familiar with HP Wolf Security, that used to be Bromium, took on a little bit of a different role. That was my first time with a security vendor, and it was a lot of fun, a lot of learning. Took on some customers, mostly Fortune 10s, some major banks, some credit card companies, and really help them protect their environment. Bromium is a solution that's also used in a lot of government agencies. So bringing in security for organizations that can't afford to be hacked and are willing to take a hit on a little bit of performance, but then how do we deploy it? One of the banks, we deployed it to over 50,000 endpoints. So planning, working with their C-level executives, working with their analysts, understanding their internal red tape and their bureaucracies and whatever, when do they need to submit the ticket so that we can meet our deadlines, and a mix of managing the account, managing the personalities, managing the project so that we meet all the deadlines, and of course, helping them get to where they need to go for the project. So I think today it would probably be called customer success. But that's when I think of customer success, what I view. Move from there.
I actually remember Bromium quite well, because this is my second company, and my past company, they did a lot of our events. So it's always fun to hear these old. Speaking about aging yourself, I've been doing what I've been doing for like 20 plus years. So yeah, I definitely remember Bromium. Being just a new company, being out there at trade shows, selling
for sure.
stuff. So yeah,
Bromium has to be one of the best companies I've ever worked for. My manager there is somebody I to this day is probably the best manager that I've ever had in my life. And every chance I get to remind him that, I definitely tell him.
And is he with, so who bought Chromium out? Who did you say?
HP.
HP did. Okay.
He is still with HP.
Okay.
I moved from there to another vendor by the name of Cyberbit.
And I remember Cyberbit very, very well. So, yep. Yeah. It's
for
like
those
going
who,
down memory lane here. So I love hearing that.
so for those who don't know, Cyberbit is the daughter company of Elbit Systems, a defense contractor out of Israel. I think Elbit is based out of the US officially. Huge, multi-billion-dollar defense contractor. And what they did was they basically took the technologies that they were using on the defense side and commercialized them with this daughter company. When I was there, I was the principal technical person in the US, while not being just a technical person. That means getting a screwdriver and going into the racks, or talking to a CISO, or talking to an analyst who's the fingers on the keyboard of how do you configure something or how do you do something. Cyberbit was very big on the OT security, and I think a little before its time when it comes to that stuff. So we helped, some water districts protect the water and make sure our drinking water that comes out of our tap stays secure. We helped some airports, which was, as an AV geek, something incredibly important and fun for me, at least. Walking around, touring an airport with their CISO and their CIO, hearing what keeps them up at night and how do we secure it and what do we do is always enlightening. And then, of course, Cyberbit also has their SOC training product, which I think they still have. I think they closed out the OT product, but their SOC training product, they deployed it in Miami-Dade College. They deployed it at University of Texas in San Antonio. So, whether it means upgrading that, building it, selling it, supporting it, anything that had to be done, boots on the ground in the US, was basically me, which was very enlightening and a lot of fun. People forget that CISOs actually enjoy sometimes doing the tech work and getting our hands dirty. And from there, I moved to a company called National Holdings, or National Securities Corporation, based out of Boca Raton, officially headquartered out of New York. As their CISO, that was the third time I was a CISO. Compliance, especially within the financial industry. I think assets under management were about 60 million, for those who are familiar with the sizes. So it was very interesting, very fun to do. Great company. Company ended up getting sold off to B. Riley Financial, helping them. I dealt with some breaches there, which is always, it's always curious to see how a company not only deals with breaches, but what the customer's reaction is. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of us would be surprised with how customers react to a breach. So that's always eye-opening to me. And then I got a call one day from, if you remember Bromium, I'm sure you remember Gregory. Gregory called me and asked me to come join him at FUX and help them with what they were doing there around certificate lifecycle management. Joined there, was the field CISO. I was there for about 2.5 years. Really great company, really good industry, definitely going in the right direction. I think PKI as an industry and just what people are doing around it is a little misunderstood. I don't think people understand how important PKI is, what the potential of PKI can be, and if you're not managing your PKI right, what the disastrous results can be. While working there, I got a phone call from a friend of mine who runs tech for a telco in the Mid-South region. And he said, "You're not going to believe this. We had an outage for 2 days because we had a shared calendar reminder over when to replace the certificates, but when we did an upgrade, everybody forgot to subscribe to the new calendar. And there was an outage because of that for 2 days with their customers. And their customers are doctors' offices and law firms and whatever. And obviously small businesses, but it still hurts. And it's still something, that's an outage that can still cost a lot of money. And people don't necessarily understand the importance of, a little certificate, a little something. So that's putting aside the IAM stuff and the potential that you have with PKI. I left AppUX a few months ago, and I started my own business by the name of AZEN Consulting.
So, I mean, all that's incredibly impressive. So,
Thank you.
congratulations on all your success. I talked to a lot of CISOs that have gone from, and you have been all over the place. You know, you've been on the vendor side, and then you've been on the enterprise side, and now you're, you know, running your own company. How have you, because CISOs are kind of like the industry celebrities that get the red carpet treatment, you know, anywhere they go. Um, what differences? Like, are there some things that you miss from, you know, being on the enterprise side versus the, you know, vendor side, and now you are your own entity? What differences are you seeing from your perspective of other CISOs in the industry that might be working for a bank or someone that you're now going to try to sell?
So that's a really good question. I will say that I think vendors get a bad rap in general. At the end of the day, vendors aren't there. The idea isn't that they're going to build something that they can sell. The idea is that they're going to solve a problem. And a lot of vendors, look at an issue and look at something that they're doing as, how are we going to help companies stay secure? And I think that that's something that gets lost in the sales process and in the whole communication of like, we're going to solve this problem for you. Often not only CISOs, but everybody kind of on the customer side tends to look at things as, oh, great, now they're going to pitch me on this, or I really need this tech, but I don't want to deal with, the vendor or whatever it is. I think it's important to keep in mind that the vendor is, of course, they're a business and they need a certain profit and whatever it is, but at the same time, they're really trying to just solve a problem. And if you can see it with vendors, there are a lot of vendors that you'll see when they're trying to solve problems and when their security team or when their development team is working on security issues that are not just, the pressing issue or something that they can collect the most amount of money for, but really something that will help solve a problem. And also you see that with, of course, vendors who open their stuff up as open source and provide the support on top of that. From the customer's perspective, I think CISOs are incredibly misunderstood within the organization. I think, and it's a huge problem. If you look at their team that usually reports up into the CISO, they'll respect the CISO because they have usually a lot of technical background, or they're able to explain kind of the issues or whatever it is that they're going through to their team and include them. But on the executive side, it's sometimes really hard for CISOs to kind of blend in, especially ones that come in from a very heavy technical background, coming into the conversations and trying to, CISOs are people. I mean, a lot of us get excited about tech and get excited about solutions, and here's how we're going to mitigate this risk. Being able to convey that to a room that's willing to listen, I think is definitely a challenge, and something that I think a lot of CISOs have trouble with. And then on my side, I think I'm just getting started, but I really enjoy one of the things that I'm offering my customers, and that I'm working with a few customers on, is what I'm calling the reverse of customer success. I said vendors get a bad rap, but at the same time, some of them deserve it. And often they'll sell something that they don't necessarily have. Instead of adopting the "if you build it, they will come," they adapt the "if they come, we'll build it," and we'll kind of string them along. And you can see sometimes that some vendors struggle with delivery and dates and commitments, but then they'll hire a customer success team to kind of help the customer along and be a project manager and help it and whatever. And the customer's really left almost defenseless. I come in as an outside resource to really help the customer in this case, get what they paid for, achieve the success. Because at the end of the day, they didn't buy the solution so that they could just check a box or do something. They bought the solution because they're looking to mitigate a risk, meet a certain compliance by a certain date. There's factors that go into all of this that vendors sometimes forget. Oh, okay, it'll take us another month, it's not a big deal. Sometimes it is a big deal. Sometimes there's fines associated with it, or regulatory requirements, or whatever it is. So being there as an outside party lets me have a little bit of a more frank conversation with the vendor of explaining these things and working together to kind of meet the requirements that were initially laid out and everybody kind of signed on. But then I get to walk away so that the customer can keep their relationship with the vendor and continue to work. I get to basically be the bad guy and then disappear and let them stay the good cop and really have a flourishing relationship. And I like that. I like the idea of, helping my customers, getting them to where they need to go and achieving what they need to achieve.
Well, because it's so, at all of our events, we do, about 30 if you count a couple of virtual events that we throw in there. And we always wrap it up with the CISO panel on one. And it's generally in the middle of the vendor room. So we have our vendors there, and we could never have our events without our vendors because they're the ones that support and pay for the events. So a really important question I always ask the CISOs is, you have a room full of vendors, how are these vendors going to get in front of you? And generally it's the exact same answer from all CISOs, knowing my needs, knowing me. Like last week, Sajit from 7-Eleven, the CISO of 7-Eleven was our keynote speaker. And his comment was, I had a vendor say, hey, do you do more than $10 million a year? I mean, he's the CISO of 7-Eleven and he's like, maybe in one store, so,
Right.
So it's just vendors do get a bad rap when they don't do their research, and it is interesting because we have some vendors that, they do our events because they're obviously meeting CISOs and meeting the right people that are the decision makers as attendees. And that is them putting themselves out there and knowing what that customer does besides the other person that's sitting there that doesn't know anything and they're on their laptop all day and not really, paying attention to the attendees and then going and telling marketing, well, this wasn't a very great show. So there's two types of vendors, there's
That's so true. That is, I mean, and again, it's there are vendors, and I feel like there's a lot of vendors that give the good vendors a bad rap, and you're 100% right there because there's some really awesome vendors that have amazing tech, have amazing people working with them. I've been able to do a lot of what I needed to do because I've had vendors that were partners, not even just a vendor that was selling me something, but we worked together to get things done. I can give you a great example. I mean, when I was at WeWork, we were looking for ways to augment the cost. And one of the things I thought of was, you know what, we have Checkpoint. I had a really good relationship with Checkpoint at the time, amazing relationship. Some of the smartest people I know have worked or do work for Checkpoint. And I had a dinner with their president at the time. Great dinner. And I said to him, look, I want to be able to have a flash screen. Everybody who comes to a WeWork, just literally, you'll pay for all of my infrastructure, and I'll put a commercial that says WeWork internet powered by Checkpoint. At some point, they'll move on to another office or whatever it is. The first call that they're going to need a firewall from is going to be to you. He loved the idea. The deal ended up not coming through, but part of that deal was, how do we do pricing? Because we also wanted to sell some of Checkpoint's products to our customers. We wanted to resell it in a package that, just like WeWork charges per desk, how do we charge per person on all of these things? Again, the whole deal ended up not going through, but Checkpoint's Infinity product is now the result of that conversation. So when you have a vendor that's willing to listen, that's willing to work with you, that's willing to do all of those things, not only are they a partner and somebody that I think you should, work really hard to sustain that relationship, even as the customer, and not say, hey, I'm the customer, let them chase me, but, work on it from both sides because they're your partner. They got your back, and that's incredibly important. Amazing things can happen on both sides, both for the vendor and for the customer.
Well, I agree. And we have worked with Checkpoint forever, and they have some amazing speakers. And, Checkpoint is great. We love working with Checkpoint. But, and even as I say that, there's some good vendors and there's, vendors that are still developing and learning. There's also some CISOs that, without putting names, I have incredible respect for CISOs, but I've mentioned this once or twice on the show. There are some CISOs that I have not worked with that will put some pretty pretty not so nice stuff out on LinkedIn, telling vendors to leave them alone, stop calling me. But yet, this one CISO works for a company that is a payment processing company that I get them telemarking me all the time, asking me if I'll change my, processing for my payment, where we process our payment. So, it's like, come on. I mean, that just, and there was a salesperson that did call him out on that. She'll probably never get his business, but I was really happy she did that, because it is the circle of life. You know what I mean? So,
Absolutely. I do think that there's a little bit of a gap right now with some CISOs. We have some amazing CISOs out there, and I think that it's incredibly, for those who want to be a CISO, I think it's incredibly important to think about what you bring to the table, not from a technical perspective. I can deploy all these firewalls, or I can deploy this endpoint security product, or whatever it is. But that's not that's the job of a principal engineer or principal architect, being able to look at the whole picture, and how do we secure the organization. I think there's a misconception when it comes to CISOs in general on how business oriented that role really is. It's a role that, if we look at our history, and I put an article about this out a few weeks ago. It came out of IT. IT security is what it was originally called. Now it's called cybersecurity, or information security, and chief information security officer. Obviously, I've actually seen chief cybersecurity officer recently as well. But with that chief title comes a lot more business mindset than I think people understand, and people think. Being able to present to the board, you don't go to the board and you just say, hey, these systems are compromised. It's going to cost us $10 million to reduce the risk. So that's how much my budget needs to be. I actually, funny, we're talking about vendors. I heard a vendor about 2 or 3 weeks ago actually say, oh, as long as we're talking about security, budgets are unlimited. Companies will pay whatever it is to secure. That's not true. There's proper ROI models that exist out there. One of the things that we do at AZEN is we help CISOs educate their board, and they bring us in to have a conversation with their board on cybersecurity from a financial math perspective. At the end of the day, every company that's for profit, I'm not talking about non-for-profits, but for profits, their number one goal is to make a profit. That's in the definition of a for-profit company. They have to produce as much profit as they can. What does that mean? That means that, hey, if the risk is higher than the reward, you don't go for it. And that's just how it is. And people seem to miss that part, that there's actual math that exists behind this. I think a great example of that, though, still under the information security umbrella, maybe a little bit less under the hacking side of things. But if we look at what happened to Southwest, I saw a great commentary about how over the years, nobody could really prove the ROI that existed and needed to exist to make the upgrades to this environment, to this solution, so that something that recently happened would not happen. The ROI models exist there. Somebody may have not known how to present it and how to do it, but that's part of a CISO's job. How do you, business continuity planning? If there's an outage, how do we make sure that, that outage doesn't occur? How much does it cost us? Is it going to cost us more than the outage? Excuse me. All of that has to go into account and has to really be part of the larger conversation. So I think that's something when it comes to CISOs. People don't really understand that a lot of the CISOs conversations are almost like an insurance adjuster. Hey, what is the risk of somebody falling and getting hit in the head, and how much is it going to cost me in medical bills? And that's how much I'm going to pay to fix it. That's really what it is. I mean, this whole notion that we all have unlimited budgets and we can, do whatever we want as long as we show that, something's unsecure, doesn't exist. And companies that run that way shouldn't be running that way, because a true CISO goes out there, educates their board, explains to them, here's how the ROI is calculated. Here's how we decide the risk. Here's how we got to that number. Okay, now the risk of all the risks, we put it all together, it's about $10 million a year. Dear Mr. Board, how much are you willing to allocate in order to secure this? And some boards might say, maybe a little bit of a more old-fashioned company might say, you know what, We like sleeping at night. We don't want to take on so much risk. We're willing to allocate 120%. We'll give you $12 million to secure it. Go get it done. We want to be able to sleep at night. A financial organization that's used to risk, that does trading, might be more comfortable with risk, and they could say, hey, you know what? We want 80%. Here's $8 million. Secure it as much as you can. We'll roll the dice. And those are decisions that need to be made by the board, not by a CISO. And we're seeing the SEC actually come in and start to add some liability to board members on this for publicly traded companies. I think a true CISO definitely helps their board, educates their board, and helps them make educated decisions.
When do you think, and when I say woke, I'm definitely not talking about woke in the context of, everything else. But when do you think the woke moment was for boards? And do you think it's the past few years when we've seen so many, huge, breaches that now boards are taking, their security posture more serious? Do you think it's like, where do you think that evolved? And do you think like today, of course, today is different than yesterday, but when do you think in the past few years that boards are really taking this serious?
So I think it's something that's still evolving. I don't think every board has woken up and realized that this is important. I can tell you that more recently, when I was a CISO and I had to disclose to the board that we had a breach, I had a board member who, it's embarrassing to say, but the board member said to me, I don't understand, how did they get in? We just put in a new security system in the office. Did they come through a window? Like, they couldn't grasp the virtual side of they came in and took the records, or the notion just didn't make sense to them. So, I think what's going on, I think the Equifax was a big breach because of insider trading that happened after it, and the SEC took notice. I think the whole what's going on with kind of the Uber CISO and what happened there is also a big wake up call. And I think in general, the SEC's proposed regulations that board members need to understand cybersecurity. I mean, it's basically Sarbanes-Oxley or SOC compliance, but instead of being applied to financial, it's being applied to cyber, and it's in my opinion, it's incredibly welcomed. I was going to write a book about this with my brother. My brother just doesn't agree with me on the politics side of things, and he doesn't think it's welcomed. But it's incredibly important, because I think without this regulation and without all of what's happening now, boards aren't going to care. It's exactly the Enron and WorldCom of what happened way back when people had two sets of books, because there was no requirement to have one set of books. There was no requirement that you have to have somebody who understands how to read a balance sheet or a financial statement on a board. Now it's a requirement. Now that's something that you're seeing. You're going to start seeing the SEC or boards require that one of the board members understands cybersecurity, understands technology, and knows what is out there and what needs to happen in order to protect the records of the company, their patents, their secret sauce, and their customers. So that I think we're still waking up, but I think between those incidents, and I think the Colonial Pipeline was one also that kind of woke people up, because the critical infrastructure, but it was a privatized company. I think that also kind of caused some gears to click in a lot of people's heads as well.
Yeah, I would agree. We do have a comment from Doug Hornaday. He said, do you use or recommend any particular tools for characterizing and managing organizational risk and security posture on an ongoing basis?
That's a great question. In my experience, what I've done is I've actually stolen people from the industry of insurance and brought adjusters that knew how to measure risk for life insurance or for issues like that. I didn't go with any tools per se, more along just somebody with the experience and how they did it there. So can't really give you a recommendation there. Sorry.
But going back to just the different breaches, and, I still think there is a stigma. You tell someone, what do you do? I'll just tell people I'm in cybersecurity. Oh, you must be busy, so there still is that stigma of people not understanding the risk and just, closing your eyes, closing your ears, and hoping it doesn't happen to you. so.
Oh, without a doubt. But I think it's really important to remember, we all take care of our cars, and we accept that we might get into a car accident. Like, we make sure that our cars are safe, secure, have seat belts, have airbags, whatever it is, because that's a risk that might happen. We all go to the doctor for our annual checkup and make sure that whatever it is, we look into it so that we can take care of our health, so that if we were to get sick, it wouldn't be so serious. I think people are going to wake up, both on a personal perspective and on a corporate perspective, of like, if I were to get hacked, how do I minimize it? Or if I do become a target, how do I minimize my exposure? And not just how big the hack is. So it's an evolving mindset that I think is definitely there. And somewhere that I think, as an industry, we're going there. I also think that there's a lot of people that hear, oh, you're in cybersecurity, and my children's school is an example. Oh, you're in cybersecurity, you're in tech. Can you fix our computer in the classroom? Not really what I do. I'll take a look, and I did end up fixing it. But that's also, like I said, it came out of IT security. We are so much more than IT security. Where, in my opinion, we're a lot more compliance than security, but we're so many other things. I mean, I also ran as a CISO physical security, and when do we bring in a security guard, like a physical security guard? Should he be armed? Should he not be armed? What kind of badges should we use? What kind of IDs? All of these other things that people aren't even thinking about. And those are also things that are incredibly, incredibly important.
I've had a lot of, pen testers on the show, and, it's so interesting, just listening to their stories, and just how easy it is to get by. It's astounding, really, just some of the stories that I've heard on the show. So it's usually with banks, which is very, very scary that it's what, of course it's with money, but it's definitely, going back to the board. So when people are, selecting their board members, and now they have to find that person that is the tech person, is it the CISO that's sitting on the board? Because it doesn't seem like the CISO would have that much time, because they're so busy. That how are they finding who that board member would be?
So it's not necessarily the CISO from that company, but we do have a lot of veteran CISOs in our industry that are able to become board members and able to kind of graduate to that level. If you think about board members in general, usually it's people who are further in the career, they've done a lot, they want to be able to share their knowledge and experience with other companies, and that's when they join the board. Similarly, I mean, we have a lot of CISOs that have gone to that level, have been there, and we can learn from their experience. That's really who we want as those board members. That's who we're looking for. I personally don't think it should be the CISO from the same company, although often you have the CEO and the CFO also sitting on the board, and that could be the case. That's not, in my opinion, it's not ideal, because I think some kind of separation and some kind of disengagement to allow the CISO to get better feeling for the board's opinions and directions would be a little bit better.
And just to clarify, when I was talking about CISOs earlier, that was one CISO. I am extremely, extremely lucky. I have so many great relationships with CISOs that take, the time out of their day to come to our events, that work for very large corporations. So, I have the utmost respect for the CISOs, because, I don't know how they get sleep, and for them to be able to come and share their expertise with our attendees and come on our shows, and like you being here today is, I'm very lucky that I have that kind of relationship. So I definitely hope I didn't offend anyone that's listening to the show about that. And then there are a lot of people out there, we see, well, I've seen, lots of people that have grown into the CISO role that I've known, because I'm fortunate enough to know a lot of people all over the country, because we are in so many different markets that are going into that CISO role. What is your recommendation for, the growth of somebody that's maybe at the manager level, but really has that goal one day to be the CISO? What would your advice be for them?
So it's funny you say that, because I've recently I read an article about this, and it talked about, understanding different tech and understanding different solutions and how to architect them, and really concentrated on the tech side of things for that. My opinion is completely different. Learn how to read a balance sheet, understand, attend your company's investor relation calls and your quarterly calls where they're disclosing information about the company and the plans, to the shareholders. You know, learn how your company's stock is affected by different things. Learn how different systems may affect the business. Learn about the actual business side of things for the company, because I think that's excuse me, I think that's incredibly important, and something that, like I said, is almost diminished on the CISO side. When you go to an executive meeting, whether it's a senior management or a board meeting, being able to define security and information security in a way that it affects the bottom line of the company, and in a way that it can change where they're doing and what they're trying to accomplish, whether it's, like I said, they said for this quarter or for this half or even for this year, these are the goals for the company, this is what we're trying to achieve, and here's how cyber can solve that. It's going to cost you a lot less. That gets you a seat at the table. That's the conversation you want to be having as a CISO. That gets you the respect to later. Here's the risk, what's the ROI number. You're going to be able to get things done.
Yeah,
Excuse me.
I agree. It's so now kind of going back to your new company. So your goal, are you saying that you're kind of that third party person that would be in between your customer and helping them? Because there's so many vendors, and even this year in 2023, we have seen so many new vendors that are doing our events, and our attendees love that because it gives them the opportunity. Checkpoint's great, Dark Trace is great, but they also like to look at all their other options, and there's so many new technologies coming out there. And I try to, when our CISOs are at our event, especially our panelists, and I ask them, I say, can you do me a favor and just please go visit at least our newer vendors and talk to them? And they love to. It's awesome because they want to know what is up and coming. So how are you keeping yourself informed of the new technologies, and is that kind of your position of what you're doing with your customers?
So we offer a bunch of different things. We offer security augmentation for your company. If your company, if you have a CISO and you're lacking in some staff, you need help with a few projects, you're looking to get some stuff just done and completed, and knock it out, and just get it done, really. We come in and we help you. That's kind of gaining traction now, especially with all the layoffs, because unfortunately companies are laying off to reduce their cost on their staffing and their liability, of course, of the overhead of employment. But at the same time, things, there's still goals, there's still tasks, there's still things that need to get done in the company. So we're able to come in and help organizations with that. We're helping some companies that don't have a CISO, and really get their cybersecurity posture together. That's a big one. Like I said, we're doing the board education and the reverse customer success, but we're also helping actually vendors with their brand ambassadorship, and explaining, maybe in a little bit of a less salesy way, and a little bit of a mutual connection with CISOs into why this might be the right solution. I have a vast network of different vendors, different people who move to a new vendor that we'll talk to, have a conversation. And often I'll think of a customer, or whether they're a customer of mine or not, somebody I know that it might make sense to introduce them to, and just say, hey, you know what? Remember you told me a few years ago we were at a CISO roundtable, whatever it was, you were having this problem. How did you solve it? If you didn't give it an optimal solution, or whatever it is, here's how this company is solving it. I think you should really take a look at them.
Well, I guess it goes back to what Doug was asking when he was talking about, different tools. How, because there are so many out there, how do you even narrow down where to start and where to begin? And is it just luck? I mean, do you always go with the big guys? Some of the people can't afford to go with the big guy because they don't have that in their budget. So how do you monetize who you're going to use, and where the risks are of trying something newer because it might be cheaper?
So I'm a true believer in, I think this industry is built on relationships. And I think that, somebody that I've worked with, if they're trying it and they're looking into it, it might be worth looking into. I always love to see a demo of what it is and throw it into a POC. And if it can solve what I'm trying to do, that's great. I was one of the first customers of a checkpoint management solution by the name of Indeni. They were brand new, and Zach, who was I think one of the founders at the time, we really connected on a personal level. It wasn't about the money, and I don't think even the solution was expensive. It was really about trying it out, making sure it could help us with what we were trying to achieve and just trying to accomplish. And sometimes the tool doesn't exist. Like, I got to tell you, sometimes what you're trying to do just can't be done, and you have to think about, how can I solve this myself? I ended up, when I was at WeWork, I was trying to solve a problem. I couldn't solve it. I ended up hiring a coder, an outside firm to solve it for me for $150,000, and the problem went away. So don't be discouraged if it doesn't exist. Prioritize. Look at your risk assessment and where your highest risk is. That's always where I would start. Plug up the big holes and worry about the little ones a little bit later. Don't forget about them. Obviously get quick wins if they're quick to solve, but that's really when I do things, what drives me is the risk, and how do I reduce the most amount of risk for the least amount of dollars.
So we have about 4 minutes until we close, and there's so much more that I wish we could have touched on. But what are your goals for this year with your, congratulations on starting your own company. So what are your goals, and what would your advice be to those out there to, what should their goals be to stay ahead of any breaches? That's a really tough question to ask, but what would some general advice be to our audience? And what are your goals as a company?
Of course. So I think this is going to be a really interesting year. I think people are underestimating the layoffs that are happening right now, and the economy. I think we're going to see that this year, between Russia running out of money for this war, North Korea having to finance more things, and Iran, of course, is going to be busy. But we're also going to see a lot of private organizations utilize hacks, and I think we're actually going to grow as far as hacking in this upcoming year. I also think, we're talking about small vendors, and they're incredibly important and provide a lot. But I do think a lot of the vendors that are small, that have been around, are going to end up being swallowed up by the big ones, and probably absorbed into their stack and what their offering is. Just because I think a lot of large companies are going to be offering, I can solve 80% of your problems. I'm 60% of what it's going to cost you to go to each one of the small ones. And with cost savings and kind of the economy right now, I think that's going to take a big importance there. As far as AZEN, what we're looking to do is just grow organically. Like I said, we get a lot of fulfillment from helping our customers and helping see them to where they're trying to go. So I'm hoping that this year is just the year that we're going to organically grow and get there and really help people.
Well, I think 2023 is going to be a great year, way better than 2022, because I do feel like we are, just from what we're seeing trending, it does seem like things, even though there's, the economy doesn't say the same, but as a cybersecurity community, I feel like we are in a great place. And Alon, not Alon Nachmany. Did I get your last name right? Again, congratulations on AZEN Consulting, and thank you for being here. There was so much more I wanted to talk about, because I know you're on the board of Cloud Security Alliance. We work with them all around. Hopefully they'll have their party out at RSA again. They used to have their big party on the first night. So maybe I'll see you out there, because we have about 30 seconds until we close. So thank you for being on the show today. And I'll have to have you back again, because we barely got to touch on anything I wanted to talk about. So thanks, Alon, for being here today. And thanks everybody else for tuning in to another episode of And Security for All. We hope that you have an amazing weekend. Stay safe, stay secure, and we will see you next week. Thanks, everyone.